Hello, so today we are here with Sharon G. Flake, and we are very thrilled to have her with us during the National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month to discuss one of the most anticipated sequels of the decade, her book, The Life I'm In. This book is the sister novel to her award-winning debut novel, The Skin I'm In. And The Skin I'm In has brought a bold dimension to literature for young readers and is now considered a modern classic, having sold over 1 million copies worldwide and having been translated into numerous languages. The novel is also required reading in many classrooms and communities around the globe. Since its publication, Sharon has authored a dozen books, winning multiple Coretta Scott King Honor Awards, ALA Notable and Top 10 Recommended Book Citations, and an NAACP Image Award nomination, among many other accolades. Sharon was a 2021 finalist for one of the most prestigious awards in publishing, the Kirkus Prize. The Life I'm In exposes readers to an important topic of human trafficking, drawing young and adult readers alike to the need for more awareness around this devastating issue and ways we can open dialogue and advocate for an end to trafficking. Thank you so much, Sharon, for this necessary addition to young readers' literature and for joining us today to discuss. So we want to welcome you, Sharon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Janice.
Yeah, Janice. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
And we wanted to point out right away, we do have the hotline here. Jen, we'll just show
the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So just going to put that up in the screen quickly, and then we'll have it just sitting in the background here for folks to see.
So we wanted to start off by talking a bit about what has inspired you as a writer. And I know within this particular book, you had referenced Maya Angelou and her book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. We have it in the background here as well. Right. So if you want to just talk a bit about some of the people who have inspired you, particularly you could touch on Maya Angelou or any other authors or people who have inspired you to write.
Well, I'll tell you, I tell people, I think I was born to be a writer. I wasn't like a lot of students that I run into now who are writing. They're like 6 years old saying, Miss Sharon, I have a book that is published, because their parents might have published it, gotten it published on Amazon, which I think is really cool, because I wasn't interested at their age, or nobody told me I had any gifts for writing in middle or high school that I can recall. I keep hoping a teacher will find me and say, stop saying that, Sharon G. Flake, I told you in 9th grade you were going to be a writer. But so far, no one has said that. And I don't think I had much talent or much interest, right? It wasn't until I got to college and realized that I was terrible at math and science, therefore my road to being a doctor was canceled, that I started to explore other things. And so lo and behold, I had some interest and some talent for writing. And my great-grandfather, I hear, wrote poetry. So I guess it comes through my mother's side, because there's a couple of us that write in different ways, and my family happened to be pretty good. So who were the people that influenced me? I would say Maya Angelou was one of them. B.B. Moore Campbell, believe it or not, there's somebody we don't talk about nearly enough, but she was someone I read, and I think my work sort of aligned with her work in terms of dialect, and she used less than I did, but just profound stories about Black people in their lives. So Langston Hughes, I always go to as my first person that sort of novel-wise writers who said to me, it's okay to be a little Black girl from North Philadelphia. And he said that through the language. He said that through having people sit around and talk about their jobs and in their their careers that they might have wanted to look differently, but because of Jim Crow, they weren't necessarily experiencing. But it was the same thing that happened in my house, right? My mom and my aunts would sit around and they would talk and they would laugh. They would talk about what it was like to go to work for different people. And so it mirrored my life in a lot of ways. And I got this sort of aha moment that sort of verified what I had already was getting from home, already getting from my neighborhood. That, you all right, girl, the way you are. Doesn't mean we don't grow. It doesn't mean we don't shift or change, right? But as a starting point, you're okay. And that meant a lot to me. Angela Davis, believe it or not, right? I read her when I was in, I want to say high school, but if not college, and just that strong, vibrant voice. We don't think about her so much as a writer, right? She's a professor. She was a political activist, but just those words on the page when I'm like, oh my God, right? All the ways those words are put together. But when you're reading it at 18 or 19 or 15, you're not thinking, look at how they put those words together, right? Yeah. It's just that you're captivated. You can't put the story down. And you see yourself, even if you aren't even aware that you see yourself. And sometimes you're seeing yourself in somebody else's skin.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's a wonderful point that you're making too, where it is so important for young people, I mean, adults alike, but especially young people, to be able to see themselves within the books that they're reading in order to feel that they have a place, right? And they feel a connection with those characters within the book. And I think it's beautiful how you touched also on the fact that when you were young, you didn't know right away that you wanted to be a writer. And it's okay for children not to know right away what they want to be.
Yeah.
From such a young age.
Well, yeah. And I see, there's this wonderful thing about social media, because now we're seeing, for Christ's sake, like 8-year-olds could really like have my job. They're like so smart. They're running corporations. That 12-year-old, man, she's a millionaire. What? Right? So, but I do wonder, will we have a lot of burnout with that generation? I love to see them thriving and doing things we never thought were possible, right? Or that we couldn't have access to. But at the same time, I worry they might burn out. So when I run into a kid, it says, Miss Sharon, I'm in 7th grade and I've been writing since I was like, the last 3 years, and it's happened. And I just can't get characters and I can't get voice. And I don't, these stories are all terrible and I can't finish them. And I'm like, but every story wasn't meant to be finished.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good
They're
point.
meant to teach you something about writing, and you may not know for years what it is. You may never know it, right? What was I learning by writing in 7th grade, except for the fact that I like to write. And I tell them, if you want to write, write. And if you don't want to write, don't write. Like, have fun with it at your age. Join a club, start a club if you want to, that's around writing and things like that. But don't feel like you failed because you're trying to do something at your age that I never even thought I could do at your age or cared about doing. Because if you're supposed to do it at the end, right, it'll show up in different ways. Life will make it show up and connect all these dots. It's not just, but it's hard. I think there's a lot of pressure on young people now because you could see it. I couldn't see that there were like 9th graders, right, getting awards for poetry and all that. I just couldn't see it because, right, we didn't have that kind of access. You had your student newspaper, you had your city newspaper, right? You had a newspaper that might cover some of the world, but they're not covering every little piece of the world. And so you could think, oh, I'm great, I'm amazing if you wanted to. And you were in a sort of silo. And there's some benefit to being in the silo, thinking that you're great. Because some of us, if you take us out the silo, we think we're great in it. And if you take us out, we start looking around saying, oh my God, I suck. Not only do I suck than anybody out here. And that would have been me. I'm not sure I would be here if social media were around when I was growing up. I was too insecure. I'm still insecure. I was too busy looking and judging and comparing. And I think I would have been the kid that said, ooh, I can't do that. Okay, let me just, go over here in a corner and be quiet.
And even with time, young people and old people, like I know even, this month we're going to be turning 41. And
Oh, don't you dare say old at 41.
no. Sorry.
Old people. I'm 66. I don't even call myself old because I'm fabulous. I'm not old. So don't, Janice, I want you to write me if she ever says old again, and I'm going to
but the point I'm trying to make is that it really all is subjective, right? And we can learn and grow no matter what age we are. We can make, changes for ourselves. It doesn't have to be set in stone from like a very young age that
right.
you must do this, you must do that. Like it's fluid where we can, learn and change and grow even through the literature that is out there. And
stumble and fall and get back up.
Yeah, exactly.
Parents have to allow us to do that.
Yeah. And that nobody is perfect, and their society puts out these ideals that so many of us struggle trying to reach those ideals, and they're simply not attainable, right? So like beauty and success is different for all of us, right?
It is, I think, and that's why I think I write the books that I write. I love the everyday average person. So they show up in a multitude of ways in my books. And I love the notion of sort of imperfection, because I think I've struggled with the perfection, right? People may not have known that about me, but in my own head, it's sort of like, I was telling young people the other day, when I was at elementary school, my teacher would say, Sharon Flake, if you don't stop looking at yours paper, I'm gonna put horse blinders on you. And I remember thinking years later, I'm really not the type to cheat or to steal off people. So why was I looking at why would I have been looking? Would I have been trying? And I thought, oh, I don't think you were cheating. You're not really the type, but you're the type to compare and to see, did I get it right? Like, am I wrong? I don't want to be wrong, right? I don't like, I remember middle school, there was a girl who had this beautiful handwriting, right? And I remember saying, oh, I want to write. I should write like her. I want you, right? So there was, I should dress like Yolanda Bruce, who lived across the street, who was a fabulous dresser, and she still looks fabulous at this age. But this sort of always looking outside myself to see how I stacked up with other people. And so I like the notion, it's funny that I would be a writer that sort of writes to people who might struggle to some degree with feeling either okay about themselves or liking the skin they're in, regardless of what that skin looks like, right? Whether it's, oversized and people struggle with that, whether it's dark, whether it's very fair, whether it's I have blue eyes and I'm in a family of brown-eyed kids, right? Whether I happen to be gay. A boy in 7th grade, could be 10 years ago now, came up to me one day in Boston, Miss Sharon, I started a book club called The Skin I'm In for Gay Students, right? And so all those people who feel like they're on the margins for some reason, it's not always a big reason. It could be just a little girl like me, who's my sister's hair is longer. I had long hair back then too, but her hair was longer, right? I had more coarse hair, and my mother, I'd be the one crying as my mother come through it, and my sister's hair was finer. So you start to, oh, I wish, why is my hair like that? So I feel good that I write about these sort of kids who are like outliers in a way, but what they do is they bring in all these other kids, right? I just got a letter from a girl in Italy, because The Skin I'm In just came out in Italian, believe it or not, 23 years later. And she just says, I love this book. This character is absolutely me. Then a letter the same week from a girl in Africa who happens to be very fair, who said, I got teased a lot because of my complexion. And I read this book and it made all the difference. And so I don't know what to say after that.
No, I absolutely love that. And I know that you've touched on in previous interviews that I've seen you in, where you've touched on the fact that when you wrote The Skin I'm In, you felt like the character of Malika was more similar to you as a person, like her character traits and that. And
Well, when I wrote it, well, I'll let you finish. Go
oh,
ahead.
that's okay. I was just gonna say, and that over the years, people were encouraging you to write a follow-up, which you've done now for sure. And that at first it was a little bit of an internal, I think, struggle for you as to how to follow up, because it was a character that was more of a bully character, which wasn't necessarily, yeah. Anyway, I'll let you go ahead, Sharon.
Well, you know, I didn't think the book was about me, the skin I'm in, when I first wrote it. And young people kept asking me, is that you? Is that you? Isn't that you? And I would like very nicely say, no, that's not me. You could, she's darker skinned, darker than I am. And in my head, I'd be like, why are they asking me this question? But it was a good question to ask because it made me think about it. And the part of Malika that feels insecure, the feeling of her, right? The feeling that I'm insecure, I can't speak up. The feeling of hers is me. And Miss Saunders is a bit of me too, because I do have that sort of like, okay, well, let's like, I worked at a group home when I was my first job out of college, 21, 22, girls that were 16, 17, 18 years old. And I tell people, they really believe me when I said, yeah, they should do what I told them to do. Because I was, if they knew me, I was like, I was the scaredy cat inside, right? But I was always respectful to children. I always tried to treat them with a modicum of respect, but I also tried to be firm with them. And so I got this nice sort of relationship with them. And sometimes you know, you have to be the adult. I was the adult in the room. So that was helpful. The skin I'm in, the life I'm in, people would always ask me if you're going to do a follow-up. And I would say in my head, my mother didn't raise a fool. Like, are they crazy? People love this book so much. I was definitely afraid to do anything with it. I never even thought about it. It never crossed my head. And then the anniversary came up and I kept getting the question. And one day my accountant asked the question. I said, oh, I would never do that. But if I did, it would be from Charlize Jones' perspective, who was the bully in The Skin I'm In. For people who don't know, which is about a dark skinned girl who gets picked on because of her dark skin, because of the way she dresses. And Malika comes up with this idea that, ooh, if only I hung up with Charlize Jones and hang out with her and do her homework and be her flunky, sort of, my life will be easier. And when you say it out loud, you're like, you know, that's a ridiculous notion, Malika. But when you're in 7th grade, you come up with a lot of ideas that don't actually, you know, aren't actually enforceable. I'll put it that way. And so I went home that night and I started writing. So why human trafficking with Charlize? At the time, I had been, you know, like everybody else, periodically reading some things about human trafficking and thinking, that is like so terrible, right? And so somehow my brain sort of put those two together. I think initially I thought that Charlize would be somebody who might be subjected to trafficking, but I think for all the wrong reasons. That was my thought was for all the wrong reasons. And one of the reasons was she was very flirtatious in the book. She was what my mother and them would call a fast girl, though she hadn't done any no sex in that book or anything like that. So I thought, oh, that's why. But as I started researching and writing, I thought, oh, no. If you're thinking that, Sharon Flake, then you're thinking that Charlize did something to deserve what she had, right? Oh, she's just too fast. She's just, right? Is what we think about young people, isn't it? It's like, if only we think about it for women, right? How many things have we seen, how many reports where, oh, she's at college or she's, you know, trying to be, you know, get a governmental job and people are like, oh, if only her dress were longer, if only, and I'm like, no. That's making Charlize be the one. But there are some factors that would make her vulnerable to trafficking. That is, both her parents had died and she had not really worked through those issues, right? She had failed 7th grade several times. Her sister was doing the best she could, but she had a host of adults running around the house day and night, and Charlize was serving them and taking care of them, basically, as if she herself were an adult. And I did a lot of research and found out that really only one encounter with a social service agency could make a young person vulnerable to trafficking. And one might say, well, why would that be? Because it sort of shows there's a crack in the armor, a chink in the armor, right? Something is amiss. And even though I don't bring any of that up in the skin I'm in, when I started writing for Shar, I have her refer to a time when somebody called children's services on them. Because looking back, I said, oh, probably it would have happened. Her sister wasn't that old. She's throwing these parties. Somebody might have done something. And then the other part for Shar is now she's a runaway. And a large percentage of homeless children are impacted by trafficking. Right? They're vulnerable. It's easy for someone to spot them. It's easy for someone to maybe convince you when you run out of choices and options, right? That, well, yeah, you don't look like somebody that's trustworthy, but I'm hungry and all you want to do is take me around the corner for a snack. That's not so bad, right? And so for Shar, she's more savvy in a way, but her sister says in the book, right? Yeah, you're pretty cool and hip for the block you live on, right? But not necessarily for all those blocks that are out there, right? It becomes that silo sort of thing. Yep, you're the prettiest girl here, or you're the smartest girl in this school. And then we take you to that school and all of a sudden things might start to shift. And that is what starts to happen for Shar. And she ends up being trafficked to no fault of her own. It opens up a Pandora's box, which is what this sort of thing does. Human trafficking is a $150 billion global business. Women and children are disproportionately impacted by it, right? So whether it's domestic servitude, I just read the other day, somebody had a woman in her house for like 10 years or something, right? Not paying them a dime. So it looks like that. It looks like commercial sex. It looks like kid soldiers, right? Boy soldiers. It looks like boys, right? We forget that. And it can happen anywhere. We think, oh, it only happens there. No, it happens here. It happens all over. It happens in Mexico and America and Europe and farms and in all sorts of places that we don't always associate it with.
Yeah, I feel like, there has to be more education in the schools around trafficking, because there is a huge lack of understanding amongst young people as to the fact that it does happen everywhere. It can happen to anybody, right? It's not just an issue that's, like you said, it's not just an issue that's here or there. It's literally everywhere. And like within the past year, a very disturbing thing happened with a young person that I know, where she went to her mother and said that she had been talking with somebody online, and that this individual had offered her $500 to speak with him for a couple of hours, and went to her mother and told her mother this, and her mother said, no, you need to stop, talking to this person. Do not contact this person. This person is not to be trusted. There's always strings attached, right? Strings attached. And so like even things like that, where it's, trafficking can happen when you're out and about and people prey on you. It can happen on the internet where people will prey on the vulnerable in that. And yeah, I would love to see a lot more education in the schools around that, so that young people can recognize some of the signs, and that it is an issue to be cautious and aware about.
Well, you know what, and her mother, I hope her mother congratulated her for being brave and smart.
Yeah.
And because they must have a good relationship, right? That she went to her mother and said, this is what this person did, right? Because a lot of times we don't feel like we can go to our parents for one reason or other. Sometimes it's on the kid, oh, you're shy, to talk to my mother about this stuff is just, oh, I just can't do it, right? Even though the parent might have tried to do that. And sometimes it's just on the relationship. We might think, oh, she's just too young, or this doesn't happen here, but it can happen anywhere. And I think people, because it's called human trafficking, excuse me, people feel as if, okay, well, my daughter's at home, she's homeschooled, she doesn't go, like you have to be moved from point A to B. But when it comes to young people under 18, they don't have to be physically moved anywhere.
Yeah.
They just recruited, transported, transferred from one place to another as part of it. But just the act that you're recruiting them, trying to get them to do this is enough to be considered trafficking. And I think we're finally globally, between the UN and the State Department and other local organizations that have been in the trenches for decades, right? And just news media sort of getting our heads wrapped around about how huge a problem this is, who it impacts, and what needs to happen, that we don't treat the children that have been trafficked as like, try to prosecute you for prostitution, as opposed to having law enforcement people sort of recognize, well, no, this is the victim here.
Yes.
How do we help this person as the victim? How do we get them connected to organizations and resources, which they're trying to do more and more, that can help them with education and schooling, and reconnect them with family, with trauma, and all of those things that get them to the other side. SHAR does not make it out of trafficking without a lot of people who show up. And my books, I think, are famous for adults showing up and stepping up. Yeah. It doesn't mean that every adult in all my books is righteous or they're doing the right thing, but enough of them are. And so plenty of them show up for SHAR. Now, some people say, why didn't SHAR just, that person was trying to help her? It's like, it's the same reason you asked me, why did Malika just like get away from SHAR, right? Because human behavior is that we don't shift very easily, right? SHAR in a way thinks that, she's decided, you don't want me at home. Well, I don't want to be at home either. I'm 16. I could take care of my life, right? How many teens have said that? And then she ends up in the slippery slope. And we get to see a lot of things about SHAR. She opens up in a way that she doesn't get to open up in the first book. Right. So we get to see she's vulnerable. We get to see that she's a kid and she's in pain. We get to see her angry. And I'm always saying to people, for God's sake, can we let teenagers be angry, Black, white, or otherwise? Can we let them? She's been through so much. Can we let her be angry about her situation without saying, well, why doesn't she just straighten up and fly right? I tell people the book is about human trafficking, right? But a novel is never about one thing. The Skin I'm In is about a girl who gets bullied, but it's also about teachers or educators who come into the lives of teens and make a difference. It's about parents, her father, whose love is unconditional. It's about friendship, right? And finding your voice. The Life I'm In is about second chances also. Does she deserve a second chance? If someone bullied you, I've asked teenagers, should we forgive everybody? And what does forgiveness look like? So you have that. It's about second chances. Does SHAR deserve a second chance? Would you give her a second chance? She's pretty straightforward and not so nice to Miss Saunders in the book. And maybe Miss Saunders has earned it based on what SHAR thinks. But about giving people second chances, about redemption, which I consider those three are sort of things you would find in the Bible or the Quran, spiritual principles that people could also wrestle with while they're looking at the whole issue of trafficking, right? When we look at a world, it is not simply, okay, we like to think, okay, all that bad stuff happens over there, and I just want to it's nothing to do with me, and well, maybe I'll try to solve that problem. But life is more complicated, and so in that world of trafficking, she's wrestling with second chances, forgiveness. Am I my brother's keeper is on the table, Shar clearly believes she is her brother's keeper. One would never think that about her in the first book, but she actually thinks it. And it turns out that Malika thinks that way too, whether they know it or not. And the final thing is God in our mess? So looking at spiritual principles, is God in our mess? No, I don't say, here are the spiritual principles, people, go ahead and look at it. No, I don't. But it's God in our mess. And God does show up in different ways in that book. Shar has conversations, right? At one point, she's just saying, I don't want God to see me. You want to pray with me? Don't pray with me now. I don't want God to see me. Like, what? And so I'm always hoping that teachers will take all that rich stuff that happens in my books and use all of it, not just what looks like low-hanging fruit, but the higher stuff, because I think kids are up for it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you touched on the point about it really being where within both of the books where there were many people that had to really show up and stand up for these girls. And I know not every child has that. So it's so important, again, that educational piece, not only for educators and children, but also looking at that parent or caregiver component and really making them well aware of, what does trafficking look like? What are the aspects of that? What is grooming? What does it look like? So there are many different people that come into play within both of these novels, which I love them both. With that being said, with your most recent one there, which voices within society did you really hope to amplify through the book? And you kind of touched on this a bit, but which voices did you really want heard and amplified through your novel?
I'm always wanting the voice of Black teens and Black African American girls to be heard, because we live in a society where we spend a lot of time trying to silence them. Oh, they're too loud. They're too this. Why don't they do this? How come they? And that they have something to say. And The Skin I'm In and my other books have proved that people from a lot of different backgrounds, teens and educators and parents, want to hear what they have to say, right? There are many ways to hear it, right? You can open up a book and you can hear what they have to say. I heard a book that comes really in African American English, because I think we have this. I grew up speaking it. I still do. If I'm doing business, I might switch. We all do that. But it's a language that I love and I value. And I think a lot of times when we're looking at that, or we're looking at Southern dialect, we have the tendency to say, oh, they're just stupid and they can't do any better. When we also live in a world where people are always trying to sort of co-opt that language or co-opt the hip parts, right? When we're doing the slang part. And so, but just to show the beauty and the strength and the power of that language. So I'm hoping that people will hear that, and that people will hear from voices of people that don't always get to be standing on podiums or center stage, right? So that there's a woman, and even I can't remember her name now, that lives in the building. You might remember her name, right? That gives Shar food. She lives in the building when Shar's in the apartment building. And she's just a woman who works in the neighborhood, shall we say, right? People that we look at and we think have no value, but she is vital to Shar being able to sustain herself out there until she can make it back home. It's the bus driver. It's the man that runs the hotel. It's the boy that sells water on the block. Everyday, ordinary. Are we still there?
Yes, yeah.
My thing is going back and forth, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, okay.
Everyday, ordinary people who step into the light. Sometimes we go, we watch. Okay, Batman, Batman, and we got what is the guy that crawls up, Spider-Man, and it's like, oh, we have to have all these superhuman traits. When the thing is, really, we just have to have eyes, and or maybe ears, a voice, and a willingness to step up to save the day. And we save the day in a lot of different ways, a lot of small ways. Saving a day probably we're not really called all the time to save the day in big ways. We call, oh, you dropped your purse. Oh, here's your purse. Oh, you lost a quarter. Or, if you don't, I'm famous for not having my shoes tied. Miss, if you don't tie your shoe, you're going to fall. Just small little ways we can show up for a kid is like, do you need help crossing the street? Oh, you don't have enough money to pay for that water. I'm going to pay for it. We can show up for small ways. Then when we're called to show up for something bigger, right? We have this track record of showing up, and then we can show up for something bigger. Trafficking is something bigger, right? And we can show up for that in different ways, just like they do for Shar, simply looking and thinking, that doesn't look right, that right there. I know somebody that said they were, I think, coming from an arena, a conference, and it was a guy by a car with a girl who looked very much like, that looked like her father, and she looks really, really young, and look how she's dressed. Sometimes it's that obvious, sometimes not. And she said, she drove away, but it bothered her. And she drove back and they were gone. But the thing about it was she did drive back. She did see something. She did notice something. And I think it's about having the courage to say, you okay? And I, for myself, a couple of years ago, I saw a guy and I saw a girl and I saw another girl, and it just didn't sit right. And I just kept looking, and I think I was listening to the conversation. And then I realized, okay, it was like the uncle, he recognized with some, okay, they're okay. And I had to ask myself then, okay, now what do you want to do about this? What, right? And so I think first of all, is sort of to be aware, to be sensitive, and not assume that, and it's not always going to be somebody like Shar is in the store at one point, very short skirt on, fur jacket, she's calling him daddy. Some of that stuff is a little bit more obvious. Some of it is not. Some of it is somebody working for your neighbor, right? And you're like, oh, that girl's a hard worker. She never seems to go. Right? I don't mean to laugh, but that girl's a hard worker. She never seems to go home. Then maybe you need to, but we don't necessarily see our friends or our neighbors as the people that would do something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And it's so important too, pointing out the fact that there's not a specific, again, way that a predator might look, or you know what I mean? So there's
why Anthony looks the way he does.
Yeah.
Right? Because people think they're going to show up and their head is going to be down like this. And he's going to be like, okay, he's going to be Mac Daddy or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to go against the grain when I walk. Oh, you think you know these people, this world? Let me twist this on his ear. And here this guy shows up. I think he had a bow tie, because when you're writing, you might not have a bow tie in the beginning, and then you say, I'm gonna give him a bow tie, right? And Shar knows clothes, right? Her sister steals them, right? So Shar, he has these like $600 shoes, and he doesn't have to tell her, she knows. He has an expensive watch, he has this, and he looks pretty put together. He looks fairly like innocent. He doesn't look like and I wanted him to look like that. I wanted people to understand that predators, people that do this, come in different types of ways. And then his sister's involved, because we try to think, oh, it's only men. Mm-hmm. Well, what you're seeing with the Epstein case right now is well, it's not only men, right? There's this, it could be women at the front, it could be women in the back, at the side. It's not only that, it's not only girls, right? It does happen to boys. It does happen to trans kids disproportionately, as a matter of fact, right? And I think we have to be able to have these conversations without being like, sort of like, oh my God. And I think one of the best places to have them is in the classroom, because I've seen how much care educators take. It doesn't mean they're always going to get it right, but right, how they can, and those questions. And when you sit with a kid with these kinds of books, you really get to figure out some things about your child, right? You think that you know your kid. Would you have done that? And you're thinking, oh, the answer surely is going to be no. And it's like, yes. Oh, he was just taking her to breakfast, Mom. What? Yeah, wow, right? And then you get to hear, whoa, okay, this is why you think you know your kid well enough to say you're not going to go to breakfast with a stranger or let them buy you shoes or get your hair done, but that you don't know
No.
until you can create a world. And as a writer, that's what I've done, where you could see, and your child could, you could, oh, okay, there's some gaps in my child's education,
Yeah.
right? Education can come in many forms. There's these gaps. And I get the chance as a parent, as a teacher, to sort of fill in some of these gaps. And anyway, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Oh, no,
Oh,
no.
no, that's great. I think, yeah, it's so important too to have that open dialogue with children, and to not be afraid to have these conversations, because I know many parents that I've even spoken to, and certain topics they just feel awkward to talk to their children about, and again, just assuming, well, my child would never do any of those things anyways. So, but having those honest conversations, and having that open dialogue so that children do feel comfortable to come to you, like the example that Janice had given, where the child came to the parent, and it's
Right.
probably because those conversations have been happening. So again, really trying to make that happening within our schools as well, so that if they're not getting those conversations happening at home, they're happening within the setting at school as well. Yeah.
Well,
I think
I
that, oh, sorry, go
am.
ahead, Sharon.
I am hearing from schools. I've heard from a couple of schools that the health teachers are now being required to touch on, or health class, I guess,
Yeah.
touch on human trafficking. One of us, a sorority, I won't name them in case I don't know what they want to do with this, but they just said they didn't, I don't know that it was a mandate, but the discussion from on high is we need to be working with young people around human trafficking. And so it might be the right book at the right time, because I think to teach this, you need something, not just facts, right? I think the thing that this book does well is it wraps those facts, it puts those facts in a flesh, in a person that they can meet and they could see and they can empathize
Exactly.
with, or be mad with it sometimes, or say, no, don't go here, or I wouldn't, or yeah, I would, or how does this sort of happen? It gives you something, not just here are statistics, this happens, because when you're looking at those, you think, well, I don't live in that neighborhood. Oh, that would never happen to me. I know how to get away or do this, right? It's like, no, okay, this is, but when you have a novel and you have a character, you get to see the intricacies of their day-to-day life and what might have led to some of the choices that she made. And you also get to see Anthony, and you get to see that Anthony that is the trafficker. Anthony made some choices that were based on the kind of way he was raised.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's easy. I'm also willing to look at sort of the bad guy, right, or the antagonist in a book, and say, well, how did you get there? I do this all the time in life. Some people get mad at me because I'm watching something on TV really horrible, saying, like, what was his background like? How did they? Who cares? Say, but if we don't know, we can't stop the world from creating sort of Anthony's, right? We can't figure out, well, what do we do we can stop it this way, but if we don't touch the Anthony's soon enough, then we still have a problem, right? And you get to, I think in a classroom, you get to wrestle with some of that stuff.
I love that. We're very much like that too, where it's like, even with at the end of The Skin I'm In, I was so much hoping to find out what happened with Shar, because I felt throughout the book a sense of empathy for her, and there's a reason why she's acting out the way that she is in that. And recently I saw on social media this, I think it was like a type of cartoon, and it had said, it takes a village to raise a child. Where did the village go? And it really resonated with me, because there's oftentimes this very much sense of individualism in our societies today, where You know, people aren't really banding together to look out for each other. And to me, it really sends the message that, you know, within our education, within our neighborhoods, within our communities, you know, take that time. If you notice something funny happening that makes you feel uneasy, like check in with yourself and know maybe there is something going on here. And it's up to us as a community to be those advocates to speak up and show up for those in the village, right? To protect our children.
Well, yeah, and I think I just read that trafficking was up during the pandemic via the internet,
Yeah.
right? So that there are all these different ways that people can reach children.
Yeah.
And you know, when I grew up, and I'm much older than you are, but I'm not old.
No, you're not. Neither are we.
Neither are you, ladies. But you know, people, like if I was walking down the street or doing something crazy, you know, Miss Portia would say, does your mother know you're Sheriff Flake? You know, they could intercede. And I think people do feel like, well, I can't say anything these days, or people are going to do this or that. And I think it's all, or kids are going to do this, but I think it all depends on how you do it. I've walked up to teenagers. I remember a grocery store not far from here. And, you know, there were these balloons, like, you know, little strings hanging down. They were hitting them and this, that. And I just felt like they were Black kids and they weren't doing anything. I think they were just doing what teenagers did. But I understood as a Black adult that, you know what, some people may not see that as not a cute, funny thing. And I didn't want them to get in trouble for doing something that was really fairly innocent. And I just went up to them and said, hello. And I stuck my hand out and said, my name is Sharon Flake. Who are you? And they said, oh, I'm so and so and so and so. And I might have mentioned my book. I don't always, but sometimes I'll say, you ever hear this? And I just said, you know what? You're not really doing anything here messing with these balloons, but I don't want anybody to think, you know, I don't know what I said. And they just said, oh, okay. And you'll be surprised if you approach teenagers in a way that's very respectful, sort of like, hello, how are you? I almost talk to them like I'm an adult, like they're an adult.
Yes.
Or even if they're 12, like sort of in that manner, that then I think you can get sort of better responses. I'm not going to say it's always the case, but I think you have to be willing to sort of take that risk. And it doesn't, I think it's easy for people to look and say, when you write about Black kids, you write about Black kids that live in the city, but our kids, right? Our kids over here in the suburbs, our kids over here in the $800,000 house, or on a predominantly white neighborhood on the upper whatever. But, you know, I found that kids really are kids. They're dealing with some different experiences, but at the same time, a lot, how that thing shows up sometimes is differently, but a lot, they want to be loved. They want friends. They want to be like, I'm cute, whether it's a guy or dude. They want somebody to think that they're cute or handsome. They want to wear the nicest clothes for wherever they're at. So whether people wearing ties in one school, then they want to wear that tie. If people wear cool jeans, then they want a lot of the same thing. They want to go home and be loved. They want to be fed, right? They want some of those same things. And I think when we sort of have this thing of they're so much different, I remember a suburb of Chicago. I cannot think of the name of the suburb now. And I remember asking them, because I have the book Bang, which looks at gun violence. And a young boy gets killed. His brother gets killed in the neighborhood. And so we were talking about that book. And I said, how many people know someone who's been shot and killed? I asked this question wherever I go, just to get a range. And many, many hands. I'm talking about a neighborhood that had 500, the houses are between $500,000 and $800,000, right? So we don't think about that in that neighborhood. And the librarian was like, afterwards, like, I was like shocked. I didn't know. Now, whether they were hunting accidents, whether they were some other kind, suicide, white teens are more likely to commit suicide through shootings, and so that kind of thing. But they were there, but nobody bothered to ask the question, because this is a very wealthy neighborhood and things don't happen like is here. Well, if you don't have the discussion, if you don't have the book, then you don't know what happens there through the eyes of teens. Like I'm always, with all this gun violence going around, I'm always saying, you know what, whether it's my book or Jason Reynolds' books, you ought to get books in their hands to have conversations about gun violence, because then you will know what they think about it. Then you will also be able to possibly come up with solutions that are teen-centered, right? And not necessarily adult-centered. But again, if you look at it like it doesn't happen here, then you don't even pose the question, you don't even bring the book, you don't even have the discussion. And it may be happening there, but even if it's not, the solution might come from there.
And I think it's so important too, from what you just said there, really thinking about the diversity of the experiences, that not everybody's experience is going to look the same, and not to make assumptions with regards to that. You've stated that when we talk about diversity, it's about representing the diversity of experience of Black people. What are some ways you strive to do that through your book?
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we think of a diversity of, okay, race, ethnicity, that sort of thing, and that's important. But I'm always writing about Black people, so I'm also looking at diversity of experience. When you live in an urban center, inner city, the city, people think your experiences are all the same. And so I'm trying to say there are a wealth of different experiences. One of them is bullying. So some are good, some, right? Which happens, that experience happening in that school that's in the city is also happening, is also the reason why I talk to young people in India, right? I mean, young people in the suburbs. So that experience, that experience of wanting to fit in, right? That diversity of experience. Human trafficking is one thing, diversity of that experience, but also the experience of having a girl who looks like you, right, come and sort of wrap her arm around you as Malika does and nurture you back to wholeness. That's an experience, right? That a diversity of experience that Black girl is having while she's living there in the city. In Pens, which is my book about wrestling, diversity of experience, she's a Black girl wrestler. The boy in the book that she loves is really, really bright, right? He's disabled, he's in a wheelchair. That's what I mean about diversity, right? If you look, I think there are many more books about, not nearly enough still, but books about young African Americans who are middle class, or who have middle class lifestyles. And I want them to keep coming because we don't have nearly enough. But I don't want people to ever think, okay, every story about every city kid that's Black has been done. We don't have to worry about them. But right now, we don't have to worry about them anymore, thank God. You know what I mean? That sort of notion that, because it's about their experiences too, that they have a multitude and a host of different experiences. We just have to let writers tell those stories and have broad enough a vision to say, okay, a kid from the city can be, Black kid from the city can also have middle class values or live like money hungry, right? Her mother, she lives in public housing, but her mother is a doctor and is in love with her mother, right? That's an experience that she's having. His daughter and Malik Ashar, oh shoot, Raspberry, are really good, I almost cursed, you'll edit that out, are really good friends, right? And so those are experiences like buddy friendships, loving money, and having to find out, but not doing just anything to get the money. All different kinds of experiences. And so my hope is to keep telling an array of different stories about Black teens who still live in the city, who don't speak perfect English.
Exactly. And it's so important too. I love the point you're making about hearing those stories, having a variety of different voices amplified, and really using storytelling as you're doing in order to amplify voices of a variety of different people, backgrounds, and experiences. Again, because in order to break through those assumptions and barriers that we see, the education is key there into getting more of these stories out and into our schools.
And to see the world through multiple lenses, not just one narrow lens.
Right, right. Oh, absolutely. That, and it's a tough time because you have a lot of people who have decided that, those books should be, different books should be canceled. We don't want those books read. We don't, and I thought that's sort of interesting, right? We don't want those books said because we don't want our kids to feel bad. And it's like, oh, well, Black kids and readers have felt bad for like hundreds of years. In schools listed as some of those books that we've had to read. But I've always found that young people, regardless of their race or ethnicity, are much more open to reading and seeing different experiences than the grown-ups, right?
Yes, I totally agree. With that being said, and I'll grab, actually hand me, or I'll grab this copy here. We have copies all over the room in here. So yeah, I'm just wondering, when we're thinking about your book overall, how do you hope that this book will impact the world? What's your hope for it?
I'm always hoping that my books do good on the planet. That they if you go to my Instagram, I have Sharon Flake, author, doing good in the world, one word at a time. Yeah. So I hope that it does good. I hope that it helps to rescue some people if they need rescuing. And we need rescuing in a bunch of different ways, right? It might be that somebody needs to come out of trafficking. It needs to be that somebody gets to find like their strength and their power, that, wow, I didn't know that this is something that I should do something about. So now I did a talk the other day and I wrote the lady and said, hey, how do people like it? And she says, she said, I went and I participated in a Zoom conference on trafficking. And now I'm trying to figure out how I can get involved and help, right? So if they could sort of be a wedge, right? A change maker in how that thing continues to happen, a voice in the wilderness that says, okay, we want to stop this. And one way we want to stop this is we want to educate people. We want to like educate ourselves. And so I think that is it, to get conversations. So I want a lot for, right? To get conversations going and to get it into to have people, I think, be okay with having discussions about tough topics with your teens. You know what I mean? I'll just say this real quick. When I thought about this in middle school, I remember riding the bus to school and the bus driver would look at me. I don't remember how many times, but he would just look at me. And I remember, and it must've been in an odd way. He never tried anything. He didn't. But this odd way. And I remember thinking for some strange reason, it's because I'm wearing red. This is how teenagers think. It's because I'm wearing red. I might have been 7th grade. So I shouldn't wear red anymore. So right there, I looked back and said, oh, you thought you were doing something. Yeah. Right? He never tried anything. I want to make that clear. He never said anything. In my mind, I can't remember if he looked at me again like that or not. I really just can't. But I remember it was enough for me to say, it's because I'm wearing red and I shouldn't wear red anymore. I never took that to my mother. I never had that conversation with my mother. My mother might have stepped in. She might have started meeting me at the bus. She might have done something, and maybe she need not do anything. Mm-hmm. But again, it goes to say that there are thoughts in our kids' heads that we don't share. There are behaviors and things that we're shifting and changing, and you don't even know why I don't want to wear red anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? And it seems like maybe a small thing, but I say it because it's not a small thing, because some other kid, whether it's a boy or child or teen or girl, is somewhere saying, maybe I should go to school a different way. Or maybe somebody does say something to them. And maybe like Anthony, they get groomed one step at a time, but they think, the teen or the child thinks, but I did something wrong. And unless we go to create that environment where we can have that conversation, they don't have a safe space that they could go to. And school is a safe space a lot of times where you can have the books and have different kinds of conversations. But as parents, you want it to be that home is a good place to do it too. Yeah. And it's not enough. If we don't challenge it, we don't know. We think it's a safe space, right? But unless you sort of get different books or different topics in that house and that conversation that push up against, okay, that, right, that you don't know whether your kid feels safe or your child or your teen feels safe to have those conversations that so you can intervene on some things. So,
yeah. And I love when you said the point about changing the world, you know, one word at a time through your books. And I think 100% that's what's happening here. It's just, it's so motivating to hear, you know, again, those voices being amplified and to really have children see those different perspectives. And again, like the example that you gave about, you know, thinking, oh my gosh, is this something I'm doing wrong? And then if you pick up a novel like this, read through it and realize that, okay, Char hasn't done anything wrong. It's just she's been put into situations that, you know, again, making children aware of what do these look like, how, what to look out for, what might this look like, and, you know, reaching out for help. So thank you so much, Sharon, for, I mean, writing your books.
Well, thank you. You guys were amazing. Janice and Jennifer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Janice and Jen, yeah.
Oh, wait, Janice.
Janice and Jennifer, yeah.
That's okay.
It's tricky. It's trickery because you guys are twins. So.
I know.
I'm like, we're gonna have to start wearing name tags. Thank you for bringing that up because I'm like, other people may have felt the same way and didn't say. Oh, thank you so much, Sharon.
And can we say the number for the trafficking?
Yeah, I was just going to do that. So right before we conclude, I just wanted to read that off. So it's 1-888-373-7888 for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Yes, and thank you again, Sharon, for meeting.
You guys were amazing. Let's stay in touch. Don't disappear.
For sure. I would love, yeah, we'll stay in touch. I'd love to get together and talk about some of your other books, delve into some other important topics as well. And yeah, this has just been wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to go and watch television.
Okay, oh, perfect. Okay, you as well.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
If you don't want to miss any of our upcoming videos, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below as well as the notifications. And you can also visit our website, chaptersforchange.com, for educational resources and to see what we're up to. See you soon.